years experience in education, behavioral support, and leadership development. She equips women with practical tools to lead with courage, clarity, and compassion. Give it up for Anne.
Thank you, everybody. So I am a teacher, and I'm going to make you stand up because it's right before lunch. So I'm like, all right. And I'm going to jump on what everybody else is doing. I have to share this one. My husband does the superhero stance, but he does it like with your hands and does the whole thing. So I'm going to put my mic down. So everybody stand up, and we're going to do, so put your hands here on your hips. So you're going to look like the superhero. Put your shoulders back, chin up, and take a nice deep breath. And exhale. And I'm going to call myself out too. I went into the bathroom because this is what my husband does with our grandkids, which they're at our house right now. He has them repeat, I am calm.
I am calm.
I am confident.
I am confident.
And I am capable.
And I am capable.
So here, my husband's in my head, so go ahead and I love that one. Oh, leave my mic. So thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, and it's been really exciting to hear everybody's talks because, yeah, there's so many connections and so many layers that I feel like we're all kind of peeling an onion, and we're all learning things from each other. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to get some of that from mine. So just kind of quickly to also share about myself, I'm an educational consultant and coach, and I've been trained in special education, or I'm a special education teacher, and I coach a lot of classrooms for kids with autism. And one of the things that I found as I've done this work is, and I've also done a lot of coaching, and I'm a trained coach in adaptive leadership. And one of the things that I found is that there are a lot of schools that are just kind of going through all these checklists, and we talk about school standards are a good thing, but everybody's focused on this checklist of things that they have to get done, right? And I know for me, when I am really stressed, I kind of go through that checklist of, all right, those are the things that I can control. So I'm gonna focus on doing this checklist and getting things done, right? I know that that's gonna help kind of calm me down. It doesn't really though. It kind of is misleading. So 6 weeks ago, I have a personal story, our family, my stepson, actually his children are at our house, have gone through a lot of struggles. He struggled with severe mental illness and specifically alcohol use disorder. And 5 weeks ago, he actually, he drank himself unconscious at my husband's dad's house and fell down the steps and broke his nose in the wall, on the wall, and was unresponsive. And this was 11 o'clock in the morning, and he drank all the alcohol in the house at our grandfather's, at his grandfather's. And so he was in the hospital for 5 days, and he's finally sick. You know, we've been trying to get him help for many, many years. And 3 years ago, I actually lost a nephew to a drug overdose. And so I've been an advocate, and I have my own story. I actually wrote a book, Shedding Lies, Living Beyond Childhood Trauma. So I have my own experiences, and that's led me to do what I do now. And so as my stepson, you know, he got out of the hospital and he was actually homeless. And my husband said, we need to bring him here. And I'm like, no, because we're enabling him. You know, I kind of went into my checklist of things and go, what's this gonna do to our family? What's this gonna do? And I love him to death. And so we brought him into our house, but I immediately went to, okay, I need this list. What's this list of house rules? How are we gonna survive this? This is a lot to manage. And so I'm like, we need boundaries. You know, I don't want this to impact our marriage. And so all these things that were going through my head, that was what I had control over. And I thought that was gonna help me, right? Obviously, that didn't. And so both my stepson and I got a cold. I'm still recovering, but we've been doing that. But I had to kind of step back and take care of myself first. So my mouth got really dry. So I had to take a step back and kind of look. I had to put my own oxygen mask on first. I couldn't help him, and I couldn't help my husband, because he's 36 years old. How are we going to manage this? So I had to, also think about taking care of myself and supporting my husband and supporting my stepson. So I really needed to think about what are the boundaries that I need, and I needed to focus on my own health first and my own wellness. Due to, kind of as a result of a lot of the childhood trauma I had, I have 4 autoimmune diseases. So I have lupus and Sjogren's. So I'm always kind of I've done a lot I've done the checklist things, and yet, again, I need to always make sure that I'm stopping and pausing. And so, as it's now 5 weeks, and we've seen a lot of progress, and he's actually doing better than he has in a long time. And I think because, my husband he's really good at kind of that encouragement, and he's been really good with the adaptive leadership, which that's kind of what I'm talking about, and I'm gonna get into this a little bit more. The adaptive leadership are those skills that we don't always pay attention to. It's the relationship skills. It's those things where there's not a clear answer, and we kind of need to explore things. We need to ask ourselves questions. We need to self-reflect, and we need to look at what are all the supports, not just us as individuals. We have to think about an entire system. So, when I work in schools, I try to get them to think about what is the system, what is the culture that we're creating for these students and for staff. It's not just students. And it's the same thing with families. So when you think about leadership, we're all leaders. No matter what our role is, we are leaders from any seat. So our focus is really on, again, what can I do for myself, and not just going into that checklist. I'm going to focus on making sure that I'm bringing my relationship, who I am, and all those things that many women, and again, men have it as well. I think you're taught to not have those skills or to not use them. Luckily, I am married to one he's a high achiever with emotional relationships, so he's really good with that. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today is, how do we do that? How can we use those skills? And because what we know, the research is very clear, is that those adaptive leadership skills are actually going to improve outcomes, and we see better productivity. So there's been a lot of research out of Harvard Business School, and Amy Edmondson, if anybody's familiar with psychological safety, she talks a lot about that. And they did, Google did a study, and they looked at what were all of the things that make a good company. And so they found that coaching and supportive environments was what's going to move the needle to see actually better outcomes. So we're seeing a lot of that happen in companies. I know Google has done a lot of work themselves. Project Oxygen and Project Aristotle are kind of, if you want to look those up, there's some really good resources. But I'm hoping that you're going to have a better understanding of what adaptive leadership. Has anybody heard of adaptive leadership before? Okay, so I'm hoping to be able to enlighten you on this. And everybody that you're talking, all of you talking today, so many of you are talking about adaptive leadership. So it's wonderful that you're kind of reinforcing what I'm talking about today. And hopefully you're going to be able to have a few strategies that you can walk away with. Again, using all the strategies that we used earlier. So we know leadership is much more complicated these days, right? And again, I work in schools. Since COVID, it has been really, really challenging. And I also work with behavioral health agencies. I work with organizations, a variety of different organizations, where again, we're focusing on helping people. And so it has become, and I mean, obviously, if you breathe, you know that our society is really crazy right now, right? I don't need to say anything, it's bad. And so with that, we need to kind of adjust. And I know after COVID, we kind of gave ourselves permission to stop. That COVID actually was, if we're looking for joy in things, actually my husband fell 30 feet off of a roof in 2019 and survived. And then COVID happened, and it was actually a blessing for us because we were able to pause, and we were forced to really focus on our relationship and making sure that we are strong. And so when COVID actually hit, we were kind of already prepared for that. And so we know that no matter what, we've got to, and even though we're 5-6 years past just the start of COVID, there's still many things that continue to expand and make it difficult. And so just to show kind of what the difference between technical leadership and adaptive leadership. So when we look at technical leadership, it's kind of the managing complexity with, again, those checklists. So think of things that have clear answers, like what's the policy? What time is the meeting? What's the agenda for the meeting? All of those things are kind of more of the technical things. And like I said, a lot of times we may use those and we have to have them. They're not something that we just throw away. We have to make sure we have them, but we don't get stuck in them. So the focus is on solving problems with known solutions and, again, working within a system. What are the policies and procedures that are necessary to help us function? And it relies on that expertise, data, and best practices. So again, lots of guidance to move that along. The role of the leader is really that expert in that they're directing what's happening. And then the success measures efficiency, consistency, and those short-term goals. Again, are you meeting, and Anna talked about the goals. It's like, yes, you have this checklist of goals that you need to meet, but are you also really helping to build a culture of support so that you're gonna have fewer staff turnover? It works best when you have all the answers and the path is clear. I mean, I don't know anything where that is always the case. And so again, just kind of recognizing that that's something that's important, but it can't be the only thing. So the adaptive leadership is when we're leading through change, and change is happening every moment, every day. And again, not just in work, in our lives. And so it's navigating challenges with no clear answers, and we're looking at changing the systems. So how can we're not just, here, let's go through this training and let's do this thing that we have to do. It's about, let's create an entire culture. And that takes longer and it's a lot harder. And I can tell you in schools, it's been extremely challenging because they don't have time. They're kind of constantly going through this checklist of things. But this is where the approach is where we're leaning into curiosity. We're asking good questions. So what is it that's the most challenging? What's working well? And let's expand on what's working well, rather than just trying to throw it out the door. And then the role of the leader is the guide, and they empower and mobilize. So again, it takes work, but the most important thing is that the leader has to have their own oxygen mask on first, and they need to be able to look at that. And I've seen excellent adaptive leaders from both men and women. And sometimes I've seen women who try to go in the other direction and try to become, forgive the word, a bitch, because they feel that that's, and I left the job because I did work with a few of those at the state level. I was actually, yeah. And so we've seen that where they're trying to outdo and be better, but they're really making the environment. How many of you have experienced those people? I mean, yeah, they're out there. And so the success measures, though, we're looking at resilience. Now, yes, there are lots of measures of resilience, but resilience is really that bouncing back from challenges. So there are even things that you can look at resilience in a whole system. So these things go together. It's not that it's an either or. And it works best when the path is unclear and the stakes are high. Again, I think right now, stakes are higher than they've ever been. We have so many challenges. I just think about, hearing how DEI is being cut in so many ways. And I was in the airport and I actually got this book, and it was Harvard Business Review, and it was called, it's called Inclusion. And it was really looking at all of the research, and they looked at all of the key behaviors. They kind of compiled everything, and all the behaviors that they're talking about are adaptive leadership skills. So what are those strengths and values that you have, that you identify? The more you are self-reflective and you're able to identify, what your strengths and values are, then you can bring them to your work or whatever it is that you're doing, again, in your family. Yes, I am an advocate. I know a lot of people, and I know all the systems in the state of Pennsylvania that I can talk to. So I know where to get resources, but I have to make sure that I'm not just pushing that along. I can't force things. I have to make sure that I'm being supportive and asking good questions. Otherwise, those technical skills and those traits and skills are not going to work. But these are, again, kind of good questions that I often ask when I'm working with schools, especially if I'm working with leaders. Because if they don't know this and they don't understand this and have their own self-reflection, they're not going to be successful. And again, education, I could tell you, self-reflection is not promoted, right? It is something that we want to see numbers, right? So the LEAD framework, this is kind of an approach that I use to really help us to look at how can we identify things and how can we use the process of identifying what's going on in the environment to then think about, okay, I may have technical issues going on here and we need a policy and procedure, but then also looking at the other aspects. So leadership is that when we're looking at things kind of leading with intention, we're at the balcony looking down at what's going on. We're looking at the big picture. We're looking at things as a system rather than looking at each individual or each individual teacher or whoever that is, family member. Education, it's about staying curious, and we keep growing and keep learning, which I love. Again, today has been so awesome to learn and just get to experience all of you who have so many amazing accomplishments and just insight. And so that always working together, so fostering that in the culture, making sure that it's a culture of learning. And then assessment, and it's not just learning formal, it's learning from each other. And that assessment is, again, understanding the whole picture. Make sure we have data. And data isn't always just numbers, it is, let's sit down and do a focus group. One of the things I do when I first start working with the school, I do focus groups, because I need to know what's going on and not just in numbers. I do look at all that, but I have to make sure that I'm looking at things and getting everybody's perspective. And then development, build capacity, so that we're training people to be more coach mentors. So it's that system, again, infrastructure. We need to make sure that after I leave, I want to work myself out of a job so that they can continue doing the work and they're able to foster that environment that's going to last forever. And hopefully, and I've worked with a lot of schools, I've had para-educators who say, I am so much better as a parent. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's one of the best things that I could ever hear, because it's when they're learning things, they're going to carry over to other environments. That's great. That's so powerful. And so I love hearing that. And so again, women have unique skills. And like I said, men do too. My husband is one of them. He's very high emotional IQ. And so empathy, inclusivity, resilience, that bouncing back, because we may have gone through a lot, and again, especially if you've been through a lot of trauma. Communication, we may have some good communication. Like I said, both men and women, and that how we use it, it's when we are using empathy that helps us in our conflict resolution. So it's not just, let's just get to the solution. Let's make sure we're hearing, active listening. What is the other person saying to me, and am I reflecting back and making sure that we're doing that? And that inclusivity actually drives innovation. So again, and all the research is clear from that. It said diversity, equity, and inclusion, and true authentic engagement of everyone. Not just, again, on a checklist. When you have people authentically involved, they're going to be much more likely to kind of be bought in. If I say, here, you're going to do this because I told you had to, how likely are they going to want to do it? They're going to sabotage it. Whereas if we get their buy-in, no matter what I do with them, they're more likely to actually implement it. So I don't even work with schools unless they are willing to do that and look at some of the hard things. And I have a school now that I'm working with, and it's really phenomenal to see all their leadership are bought into this. It's night and day. And it's heartbreaking to see, an environment that is not buying into that. Unfortunately, we see it too many times. So I'm actually not going to go into those because I also have at the end, I have a freebie that will kind of give you more strategies and kind of go through the LEAD framework, but I didn't want to give you all the details of that, so I will have a QR code. And so, is that, I'm done, okay. So, yes, let me get it. Let me get to, so the thing is that you want to look at the big picture. Look at all of it, make sure you know what's going on, not just numbers. Look at what are people feeling, ask them. Any kind of qualitative survey, just any information that can be really helpful. And that the LEAD framework, again, really helps us to pull those adaptive leadership skills, which you've all mentioned today. All the things you mentioned are those adaptive leadership skills. And so you can set up a strategy session with me. You can scan, and there's also a link at the bottom. And then I also, I think on the next slide, nope, it didn't. So I have another QR code that I'll get for you that is going to lead you to a freebie. It's the LEAD Action Playbook. And so that will kind of give you some of the details that I talked about today. So thank you so much.